I don't know where to start today because I am full of excitement. I don't know which of my instruments I should use in broadcasting to all the story warriors to join us in studio. Let me see. Should I use this Vuvuzela from South Africa and invite all the story warriors, story warrior associates, friends, families, fanatics? Draw your chairs closer. And if you don't hear me through this Vuvuzela, let me tell you, I'm coming for you. Maybe you hear me through this one. Whoever you are, whatever you are doing, please draw your chairs closer because we have an amazing guest in studio today. A gentleman with a biography like none other I have seen. And I know some of you are hard of hearing. So you know what? I'm going to pull this up. I don't bring this out very often. I'm going to bring this because this is as good as it gets. Pull your chairs closer and let us get to work and learn. I am in the business of bringing fascinating personalities, trailblazers onto this channel so that we can learn from them. And if we can replicate what they've done, or we can learn from them and build and construct and cultivate a better world. Today, I'm very excited because in our studio, we have a gentleman who has been all around the world. He has done it all. And yes, I'm talking about Mr. D.R. Rawson. Please, wherever you are, please give an applause because this gentleman, I am so fortunate that we are talking today. Mr. Rawson, he goes by DR. The first time we met was all by happenstance. And I started calling him doctor. And DR said to me, I'm not a doctor. And I said, I know people that go to school for 7, 8 years just so that they can get a DR in front of their name. You got it by your parents. But before we get to that, I want to say, DR, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Rawson, for coming to our studio. Say a word or two before we take it away from here.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for that introduction. That's quite an introduction. I appreciate what you said, and I'm just grateful to be here, an opportunity to share and maybe pass on a couple of things that I've learned.
Thank you so much. That's what I am in search of. That's what I'm looking for because the people that are curious are the ones that I believe would eventually do something significant in the world. And I am associated with people in Singapore, in Asia, people in South Africa, people in the Middle East, people in America. They're all curious. They want to learn. They want to be able to make something of themselves. And they're looking for the kind of knowledge that you have an abundance of. Mr. Rawson, I was doing a little bit of research, and it turns out you have been a serial entrepreneur. You've founded well over 32 businesses over the years. Let me ask you one question. How did you do it all?
Well, at the time it's going on, you don't think about doing it all. You just think about what's in front of you, and that's kind of the way it came up. My first business at 21 was an accident,
Mm.
happenstance. People believed in me and said they'd put up the money, and so they did. And I sold the business 14 months later and paid them all back and made a nice little bit of money myself. And my second business, I was 23. And it came up because I thought what you were supposed to do is go to work for people. And I went to work for this guy. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners can identify with this. He was a jerk. He was somebody that you didn't want to work with. He didn't know any of his employees, didn't know the product at all. And he just treated everybody like they were terrible.
Mm.
And
Mm.
I didn't like that. And I told him so. And I said, nobody out there likes you. And he said, does that include you? I said, well, I'm prepared to move into that camp.
Yep.
And he said, well, why? I said, because you don't know anything about us. You don't
Wow.
call us by name. You don't know anything about the product. It's very clear to the customers. You don't know anything about the product. And I said, the only reason you bought this company was for the bottom line, which was the right reason, but there has to be other things go along with it. He
Yep.
said, well, what would you suggest? I said, I suggest sell the company. And he said, well, who would I sell it to? I said, well, I don't know, depending on the price, you might be able to sell it to me. He said, you? I said, yeah. How old are you? I said, I'm 23, but you're proving my point. If you'd read anything about me, you would have known that one, I am 23, two, that I do have the means to buy this company, and three, that if we can't work out a deal, I'm gone. He said, okay, well, what's next? I said, tell me how much you want for the company. So I wrote it down on a piece of paper and I looked at it and I realized that just in the 6 months or so that I'd been there, he'd passed by so much business because people didn't like him. They didn't want to do business with him. And the employees weren't doing anything to make sure that we got the business because who cared anyway? So I looked at that number and I said, I'll bet I can make that back pretty quickly. And so I said to him, all right, Jim, I'll buy this company from you, but under one condition. He said, what's that? I said, I want you to gather up all of your stuff and put it in a box. You take that $5 million painting. This was 1970. You take that $5 million painting and take it with you because nobody ever wants to see it again. They're tired of you lording that over them because these people will never own a $5 million painting. I won't ever own a $5 million painting. I wouldn't put that much money into something that didn't help others. And I said, so you take that painting with you. I'll give you one company car and you just take off and never, ever darken that door again. Ever.
Wow.
He said, I can do that. So I had my attorneys draw up the paperwork. I gave him a cashier's check and he left and he kept
That was it.
He never came back. When he walked out the door, I turned around to everybody and I said, okay, he's gone. Down, laughing and clapping, and it was great. 6 months, and I recouped all my money.
Wow.
6 months.
6 months.
Yeah.
6 months.
The overhead lifting of business. We manufactured cranes and hoists, and we purchased wire rope from the various manufacturers, and we installed it in elevators and hoists, all that kind of stuff. Tie down equipment for trucks. It wasn't very sexy. It wasn't very exciting,
but it got the bug. It got the bug ringing.
Absolutely, and it was hugely necessary. Hugely necessary.
Yes, sir.
So anyway, that was the second company, and I owned it for 3 years, and then I sold it to all the employees.
Very interesting. And you talked about happenstance, and now I'm just jumping in right here. You talked about happenstance. I got to meet you by pure happenstance. And I have to give God all the thanks because what a brilliant happenstance it was. What a coincidence of fortunes it was, because we've talked a few times. And each time I talk to you, I go with my heart soars. And it makes me feel special. And for those who may not be aware, if you are coming here for the first time, if you're viewing this for the first time, this is the Story Warrior channel. The channel that features stories of unsung heroes with untold stories, but more importantly, people who are trailblazers. My full name is Gideon Fomokwai. I'm the guy behind this project. It's a project for those who want to learn. It's a project for those who are trying to connect the dots. People who are seeking for knowledge. They may come from backgrounds that are not necessarily the most fortunate. Maybe they're first generation immigrants. Maybe they're first generation college goers. Maybe they're first generation of something, and they're trying to make something of themselves. The gentleman in studio made something of himself. He took happenstance and turned it into a multi-million-dollar business. And you've run well over 32 businesses. Now, can you really take us to the moment when something in you told you, Mr. Rawson, that I am the guy who can do it? What was it in you that made you feel like, you know what, I'm 21, I can do this. I'm 23, I can buy this thing, buy this company from that guy?
You know, I've had the attitude since I was a young boy, and we were dirt poor and penniless and living like everybody else that was dirt poor and penniless. And I've just had the attitude that it doesn't have to be this way. I can change it. I have the power
Thank
to
you.
change it.
Thank you.
A lot of people tried to get me to change it to their way of thinking. I took a lot of beatings. I'm just writing about Black History Month right now, and Rosa Parks and her courage.
Mhm.
And I'm being forced to recount my own youth, and I took a lot of beatings because I didn't want to run numbers or get into prostitution or get into a gang. And
Mhm.
when I was in junior high school, I was 5'11", 235 pounds. Who
Mhm.
wouldn't want a big, tall white guy to be in there? I was in a school that was all African American. So yeah, we got the white guy. So
Okay.
yeah, no, it just didn't work for me. I had a path. I had things that I wanted to do, and if I came up with the idea, then I was more amenable to it than if somebody said to me, "Hey, you got to do this or you got to do that." I don't have to do anything.
Mm.
I can do what I want to do. And
Mm.
so after I sold my first company, I went to work for this guy that we just talked about, and
Yes.
I saw a magazine in there that had it was an industrial magazine, and it had pictures of a bunch of ladders. I think there was 3 or 4 of them on the cover. It showed
Mhm.
these little people crawling up the ladder. At the
Mhm.
top of one was a gold watch, and the top of the other was a pile of cash and different a home and different things people were claiming for. But there was one guy, he was going back and forth between all the different ladders.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
had a completely different path, and I said, "That's me. That's the guy. I am not working for somebody for 50 years so they can give me a gold watch and say, 'Hey, job well done.' No, that's not me." So
And you've never been an employee or not a fan of being a 8 to 5 or 9 to 5, as they call it.
that was the last time I was an employee was when
Wow.
I
Look at
worked
that.
for that guy. So no, I never did that, which meant I was saying to myself, well, you'll never work 9 to 5 again. No, hell no. You'll work from 5 in the morning until 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, whatever the job is done,
Yep.
and whenever you can go home. So I did that, and it caused me to travel a lot, which
Yep.
was at a great personal expense
Mm.
from a family perspective, but it was what I felt like I had to do, and my children now, my youngest is just turning 43, my oldest is 56. I have
Mm.
6 of them, and
Wow.
they all understand now that what dad was doing was for the quote unquote greater good because the things that I did enabled more people to work, it enabled
Yes.
people to get further along. A lot
Yes.
of people became entrepreneurs, became very wealthy as a result of it. I mean, there were so many pluses.
Hmm.
And so while it was a hardship for my kids, it wasn't anything like the hardship I had to endure.
Yep.
But it was nevertheless difficult for them because the rest of their friends had parents that came home. They worked 9 to 5 jobs or 8 to 5 jobs or whatever, and they came home and did all their things. And I did my best to be home on weekends.
Mhm.
Didn't always work out, but most of the time I was home on weekends, and I spent as much time with my kids as I could. And so it worked out, and but it was a path that I felt called to.
Yes.
I spent 22 years as a as a minister in
Okay.
addition to what I was doing, and
Wait, you found time for that, and I know you're a veteran. You're a Vietnam
yeah,
veteran.
yeah,
Spent 22 years as a minister whilst running your businesses. Is that what you're saying?
yes, it was, and
Wow.
raising a family,
Mhm.
and that was is something I felt called to do.
Mhm.
I've always felt close to God, and I've always felt a certain level of spirituality
Mhm.
in the things that I did and the things that I tried to do. And so when that opportunity came up, I embraced it, and it's good that it did because it was helpful to the kids, the family, and it was
Mhm.
helpful to so many people that we
Mhm.
ministered to and worked with as families throughout the
Wow.
years, and it was great until I decided it wasn't.
Yep. Yep.
And
And I have to acknowledge, you've also been a philanthropist. You are more recently an author because people find you fascinating. They want to know more about you. So you do not want to write all these years. You don't want to tell your story all these years. So what finally encouraged you to say, you know what, my story is worth telling, and I should be the one to tell it. What encouraged you to do that? Because I find that you've done a lot of things, and I'll still be diving into some of them.
You know, I meet new people like yourself, and you start talking to me, and you say, "Well, what did you do about this, or what do you know about this?" And I start telling them, and they go, "Wow!" And then I tell them a story that happened during that time or something. They go, "Holy crap, that happened to you?" "Yeah, that happened to me." "Man, you ought to put that in a book."
Yeah.
I said, "Yeah, someday maybe. I don't know." So when I finally retired at age 75, a good friend of mine, Gary Friedman, said, "Well, now are you gonna write? You gonna write that book?" I said, "I don't know. I can't write, Gary." I mean, in college, teachers said, "Oh, you don't want to write. You're not that guy." And in high school, it was, "No, you're not that guy." Even though I was a class valedictorian and all that other stuff, they still said, "You're not that
You're
guy."
not a good writer.
Yeah, so my friend Gary said, "Look, you've written business proposals all over the world that have been accepted, and you've met with people all over the world. You've written tens of thousands of emails. Don't tell me you can't write.
Yeah, yep.
You
I
can
like
write."
I like those kind of friends.
Yeah. So I decided to put my hand to paper, and in 6 weeks I wrote my first book, which
Wow.
was a memoir about me and some of these stories that I'd told people. The first time I wrote it, it was like 120, 30 pages. And I just finished the rewrite on it. It's now at 230 pages.
Uh-oh.
So
Rewrite got more
obviously
pages,
I
not
left a
fewer.
little bit out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, I wrote that, and then I wrote a couple of novels, and I wrote some children's books.
Mm,
And again, it's the things I want to do, and I want to give credit to my wife here.
absolutely.
Both my first and my second wife. My first wife of 26 years, she was kind enough to give me my head and just let me go and do the
Hmm.
things she wanted, the responsibility of the family. So
Hmm.
she had it firmly, and unfortunately, it didn't last beyond 26 years, but it was a good thing because I would have never met my current wife of
Mm.
29 years.
Wow, beat the
And
record. Talk about beating the record.
yeah, I've got experience of being married a few years actually.
Okay, okay.
Anyway, my current wife was the same way. She's a business person herself, and she felt that I needed to do what I wanted to do because in invariably it would help somebody else.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
she saw that, and
Hmm.
I'm the guy that I never really worried about money. When you've been so poor that a shopping cart looks like a real home, uh, it really doesn't matter. And
Hmm.
so I just focused on doing the things that I should be doing, and I did that, and
The work,
the rest came.
the
Yeah.
rest came, the money came by serving. And when I look at the various businesses that you've run, for anyone that is joining, DR has owned well about 32 businesses. At least those are the ones that we could find some records on. Now, you even started a business known as Ornamental Iron and Steel Fabrication in Boulder City, Nevada.
Yeah.
You've done all kinds of businesses, and they're all very unrelated. But tell me about that business. It's something about it caught my attention. What is it about Ornamental Iron and Steel? What?
Well, a friend of mine said, "Hey, there's a guy up in Boulder City who's running a steel company, and he's a great welder, but he doesn't know anything about running a steel company, and he's built the business up kind of good, but he's kind of losing it right now." Yeah, I
Mhm.
went through a divorce, and he said, he really needs your help, and I think you two would hit it off. So Rick and I met, and we hit it off. He's a great guy and fantastic welder, the best welder I think I've ever seen ever.
Wow.
And but he didn't know anything about business, so we put our
Mhm.
heads together and we created Armor Steel
Mhm.
from what he had, which was called Fridella Steel.
Mhm.
And so Armor, we went from servicing the needs of 18 out of the 32 builders in Nevada
Mhm.
to servicing 28 of the 32 builders, and we were completing more than 100 homes a month
Wow.
in their steel needs. So stairs
Wow.
and wine cellars and gates
Mm-hmm.
and ornamental iron and that kind of stuff. We were doing work for casinos and other businesses that wanted to incorporate iron work into what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
We had a group of 43 people. About 40 of them were uh, Spanish speakers. Spanish was their first language, and they
Mm-hmm.
were all artisans. They could bend steel and do so many unique things with it. And so we created a certain reputation, and we built custom gates for very, very wealthy people, these
Mm-hmm.
big, expansive gates that
Mm-hmm.
motorhomes go through and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
we built those things, and then ultimately we sold it to a company called Triton Stairs here in Las Vegas, who puts stairs in new homes, and of course they
Mm-hmm.
put hand railings. So the hand railings used to all be wood, now they're steel. So they
Mm-hmm.
put steel underneath the banister. So it was a fascinating business, but I had been a consultant to the steel industry. My dad was in the steel industry with Bethlehem Steel when I was a kid,
Mm.
and so steel was always something that was
Steel was running through your bloodstream or in your
it was in
family.
there somewhere. I had a steel nerve. I don't know.
Okay, that's really interesting because I was like, okay, first, here's what I'm noticing. Some of the people that I'm really falling in love with and inviting them to be here, they're some of the most brilliant that I respect. Like, and they are what I now see. There's a trend to it. They're all polymaths. They're very smart people. They can do a variety of things. They can touch anything and turn into gold. So I see you like some of the other guests, like Dr. Gabriela, as a Renaissance woman. You're a Renaissance man. I had a lady by name Sahana Singh, a friend I've known since 2002 in Singapore. She's also a polymath. She's an engineer on one hand. On the other hand, she's a writer, an editor. And you've done all kinds of businesses. You've also been consulting. You've done consulting to insurance brokers. Tell me about that because that's a field that my wife and I were fascinated by. That you consult with insurance brokers. Tell us about that.
Well, I first started working with insurance companies when I was in healthcare. I had a business in healthcare for 11 years, and I consulted to the insurance companies as to a way to minimize their risk in the area of workers' compensation.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did a lot of that. And then out of the blue, a few years later, somebody had brought my name up to be considered as a CEO of a company that was going to be a startup.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy's ad said this: CEO wanted, call. Had to be the shortest ad I've ever seen.
And you called.
Anyway, they handed it to me and said, you should call him. So I called the guy and we kind of hit it off. And turned out he was the CEO of a publicly traded insurance company. And he
That's
had come
beautiful.
up with a business plan, a one-page business plan on something you could do with brokers and for insurance and reinsurance companies.
Mm-hmm.
And his board of directors said, nah, you can't do that. Sorry, you can't start another company.
Mm-hmm.
So he wanted to find somebody that he could partner with
Mm-hmm.
and do this. So he took the position as chairman and CEO, and I took the position. I proved the value of the business plan, and I took the position as president and CEO. So he was chairman, and I was president. And
Mm-hmm.
we built that company from scratch. Um, Started out with two people, and we grew it to a little over 75 people and gross sales of more than $1,256,000,000.
No kidding.
Yeah.
No
So we did
kidding.
that in 20 months.
20 months. Where was that? Out of California, Nevada, or some
California. It was out of,
California?
yeah.
Wow. And you've always been resident of Nevada because there's a certain kinship that I think we we We
Yeah,
identified because I
I
indicated that I went to school in Nevada. I've been to many other states, but I still find like Nevada is still my home state as far as United States is concerned. So that's our kinship. But have you always been a Nevadan, or have you
no,
always been to other places?
no. I I was born in Independence, Missouri, and raised in California from the time I was 9 months old until
Mm,
I finally left it in 2014 to move here.
mm.
But we bought that steel company in 2003. And when I was selling it in 2004, my wife was looking over my shoulder and she said, "You know, I really like this place. I like the heat. It feels good. I really enjoy
Phew.
it. Don't you?" And I
I
said,
love
"Yeah,
the heat too. I love the heat. I love the heat.
yeah."
I can't
So
have enough of it.
I also operate under the principle that a happy wife, happy life. And so she said
I
she
would
wanted to
absolutely subscribe
retire
to that.
here. My question to her was, "Do you want to buy a house now or do you want to wait till we retire?" She says, "Buy it now if you can. We'll use it as a second home and a place to come and visit." I said, "Okay." So I tried for 10 years to find a place, and it took me that long to find the home we're living in now. And
Mhm.
in 2014, we found it. 4 months later, she retired. And the rest, as they say, is history.
History.
So that's how we got to Nevada, but we surely love Nevada. We lived
Mm.
a mile from Disneyland in Southern California. And
Okay, so on the Nevada side, but close enough to Southern California. Or
yeah,
yeah.
we still go back a couple of times a year. We only have two of our children living in California, one in San Luis Obispo and the other one in Bakersfield. And
Wow.
so we have some grandchildren that live there as well. But yeah, we're not a fan of California anymore, I can tell you. I don't know why Californians are a fan of California, but that's the way it
No, I have not been to Nevada in a while, but I'm still a fan of Nevada, especially the heat. The thing that took me out of Nevada was sometimes the economy, especially in Reno, where I went to school. The economy after 2008 really, really took a terrible hit, and I needed to, like, I was getting into the prime of my active years. I didn't just want to sit around and dream something. I wanted to go where I could dream and work. So yeah, I still have my strong affiliation to Nevada, and I'll be coming back in September to speak at a conference in Reno. But let's explore one other business that I know you've also been part of, which is, again, for anyone that's just joining, Mr. Rawson has done things from many, many different areas. You once owned an oil field in Duncan. Is it Oklahoma? Is it somewhere? Did I get
is.
that right? Or is it?
In Oklahoma. Yeah. It was right behind Halliburton in Duncan, Oklahoma.
Mhm.
And it was an old Indian lease. They were the original on the lease. And I had invented a downhole oil pump. And there in Texas, you've seen these pumps, the pump jacks that do this up,
Yes,
down, up.
yes, yes.
Well, you get into a neighborhood and they don't like them that much. And a
Mhm,
lot of oil in Texas is shallow well.
mhm.
So I invented a pump that would go down as far as 3,200 feet, which covers most shallow wells. And instead of
Did you
doing
say? Did you say
this,
3,200 feet?
3,200 feet. Yeah.
And you invented that baby that keeps
No,
going
no.
like that.
I invented a different one.
Okay,
This
different.
one went down, you put it down in the well, and
Yes.
instead of going back, and you can't see my hand, instead of
I,
going
I
up and down like that, it went
yes.
like this, around and
Oh,
around. And
creates a little, a little.
it screwed the oil right out of the hole.
Wow. What's
And
the name of the invention again? You say it says
it's
pump.
called a progressing cavity pump.
Okay, progressive
And it had
cavity
been
pump.
used for years in a horizontal plane, but had never been used in a vertical plane.
Mm.
So I created an environment where it could be used in a vertical plane. So essentially the sucker rod,
Mm-hmm.
which is what's attached to the pump jack that goes like this,
Mm-hmm.
that sucker rod goes up and down, and it's attached to essentially a device that's the same as the water pump that we used back in the 1800s to
Yeah.
pull water out of the ground.
Yes.
So I created this progressing cavity pump and put it all together, and it would literally fit underneath your kitchen table
No
and
kidding.
pump.
Yeah.
So it could be easily hidden behind a bush or underneath a tree and with some bushes around it. It could be virtually anywhere.
Yeah.
And so we sold a lot of them. We sold them first to Mobile, and then we sold them to Shell, and then we sold them to Getty, and we sold them to a few people, and it just all of a sudden it just took fire. And so one day a pump jack company came along and they said, "We noticed you've been selling a lot of pumps." So our pump sold for $3,200. Their pump sold started at 5,700.
Mm-hmm.
So we were taking a lot of their business. And our pump would stay in the hole for easily 3, 4, 5 months. Their pump was
Wow.
having to be pulled out and reworked
Mm-hmm.
constantly at a big expense.
Hmm.
So a guy came along and he said to my partner and I, we were 50-50 partners. He says, we'd like to buy your company. And I said, great, everything's for sale. What do you have in mind? He wrote a big number on a piece of paper, and I said, Is that 2 checks or 1? He said, That's the amount of each check. It's 2 checks. I looked at my partner and he looked at me. I could tell. I said, sold. That was the end of it. The guy came back the next week with 2 great big checks. I gave him everything that we had. The guy that manufactured our top units said, yeah, I'll work for them. Well, it turns out they just wanted to buy it and get rid of it. They didn't want to put it on the
Wow.
market.
Oh,
Yeah.
just so that they can destroy the competition
Yep.
that they were facing.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
my
it was
goodness.
unfortunate for the guy that manufactured the top unit, but we gave him some of our money, and so he was happy. And we
You
had
didn't
all
seek any. You didn't seek any royalties. But you probably
no,
you did not know that they were going to kill the baby.
I didn't know at first that they were going to kill it, but after he
Yeah.
gave us the checks, I was beginning to get that idea.
Oh man.
So my friend and I each went home to our wives and we said, well, we've got enough money now that we can be home all the time. We can help you raise. He had 5 kids. I had 6 kids. He told his wife, he says, I can be here all the time. I can help you with the kids, get them off to school, do all these kinds of things. And she said the same thing that my wife said. Listen, Buster, I married you for better or for worse, not lunch.
Oh. Oh.
So the next morning, we showed up in an office we thought we'd never see again. And
And started all over again.
we sat there for 2 weeks trying to figure out what we should do. And finally, we decided we'd put it into an oil field. So we bought an oil field in Duncan, Oklahoma, and it had a number of wells on it. And when we bought it, the value of oil was $18.50 a barrel. So we bought it. It cost $18.50 a barrel to get it out of the ground. So it was kind of break even. And we thought that'd be okay because it's going to go up. That was its history. And sure enough, it went up over the next 2.5, 3 years. It continued to go up. I went to bed one night and oil price was $28.50 a barrel.
There you go.
Good
investment. Good investment. Almost double.
Next morning, I woke up. It was $18.50 a barrel. Just overnight, just went like that. So I called the pumper and I said, "Shut it off." I said, "I'll send you a big check." Shut it off. Lock the gate. It's done. And so we sent him a big check, and we sold the oil field for 10 cents on the dollar. And so we went from having a pretty decent income to not much.
Ouch.
So that was the second time I had lost everything that I had. And, so anyway, that's the way it went. But yeah, that's what we did with that company.
So it wasn't the happiest of happy ending, as I would say. It was up and then down, and then you moved on from there.
Life has always been like that. I mean, if you get depressed over the fact that life takes a turn and falls down, you just have to learn from it and figure out, well, what can I do that will make it go back up?
Yes, sir.
And that seems to be what I've been better at than anything in my life, is to try and figure out what's the next thing I'm going to do.
Yeah.
What am I going to do to turn this circumstance around and have people benefit from it.
serendipity and talking about how or what people can benefit from some of those lessons. I would say, what are some of the lessons you've learned over the years that you can share with young and upcoming entrepreneurs who are hungry? They're willing to work hard, but they're also afraid that sometimes they may face a rough turn. They may make a negative turn and they end up on the wrong side. So,
Mm.
what are some two, three lessons that you can share with guys that are, they want to go far, but they're also a little bit afraid of risk?
Well, the opportunity to make a wrong turn is excellent. Excellent. And there's so many wrong turns. When I started the insurance company, I used to come in at 5:30 in the morning and there'd be a line of people at the door. Hey, boss, what do we do about this? What do we do about that? And
Yep.
it was the learning curve was just like that. It was
Yeah.
straight up and down. And so that's the way it is with most things. And the problem is that most young entrepreneurs face is they have this attitude that I know it. I know how to do this. I got
Mm.
this. I've
Yep.
done this.
Yep.
I'm the best welder. I'm the best arts person. I'm the best writer. I'm the best
Mm.
whatever. And so
Mhm.
they think that that talent and that talent alone
Mhm.
will carry them forward.
Yep.
I was just stupid enough to realize that I didn't have all the answers.
Mm.
And so my big thing was always to find industry experts that I could rely on. In
Mm.
the case of the insurance company, the guy who came up with the original plan agreed to be my resource. And so I used to call him in the morning and I'd say, hey, they're asking about so and so. What's the best way to handle this? And he'd give me a short answer. And I'd
Mhm.
hang up, and it wouldn't be, hey, how you doing? What's your day like? What's the
Mm.
weekend? None of that. It was, this is the problem. I need an answer. You give me the answer and hang up.
Mm.
And we did that and worked on that basis. And as a result, we got the job done.
Mm.
I was in an automotive interview a few years ago because I'm a car guy, and it's a company called or a
Do
site
you
called
do you do you
Cars.
collect do you collect a lot of
I did,
precious cars?
I
Okay.
did, yeah, but I don't now. But
Okay.
anyway, at the time, I was general manager for the first Concours d'Elegance here in Las Vegas, and so they interviewed me, and the guy asked me a single question. He says, if you could give advice to people about cars or just life in general, what would you say? And I said, Google more.
Okay. Which is basically
I
what you're
leaned
saying.
forward. He said, Google? I
Yeah.
said, yeah, Google more. Why? I said, because most of the people think they have the answer and they don't.
Yes.
You need to look through Google or Bing or whatever you choose. It
Thank you.
doesn't make any difference.
Thank you.
Just pick something, someone,
Yep.
ask questions, lots of questions.
Yep.
And from the basis of those questions that you've asked, you'll distill an answer that won't necessarily be the same from everyone, but it'll give you a composite answer that's
Mm.
probably the right answer.
There you
And
go.
so that's how you move your business forward. And so
Fantastic.
many businesses fail because the guy who starts it or the woman that starts it think they know everything.
Yep.
And as a result, they don't. And
Yep.
then when a problem comes up, a real problem, they don't know how to
Mm.
handle it
There you
because
go.
they won't ask questions.
That that is a powerful answer because, like you say, you assume that you're stupid enough to not know everything. And guess what? There's plenty of research that supports that. A lady by name Dr. Carol Dweck at Stanford University, she calls it growth mindset. She has actually demonstrated over and over that people with a growth mindset, even if they don't start at the front of the line, they could start at the back of the line. But because they are willing to ask questions, they're willing to learn, they're willing to make themselves the ones that are not smart enough. They will eventually work their way to the front of the room. So that's what I hear you saying there, and I really applaud that because it's something that I need to learn and relearn and unlearn and relearn over and over, and other people, especially in new fields that we are venturing into, business wise, me and my wife. But there's also so much more that we could talk about. I know you have uh, you've had some inventions besides the first one that you talked about in the oil field. One of your special inventions was sent all the way to space into orbit. So, why don't
Yes.
you tell us about that special invention and
Well, that
Maybe.
second company that I told you I owned, the overhead lifting one, we did push-pull devices. We would what's called swedge things
Mhm,
onto wire rope and different things.
mhm,
And so Hughes was one of my customers, and they were working on that lunar rover. And so the engineer I was calling on, I called him, and he was more than mad. He was frustrated. He was frankly, excuse my French, pissed off. He just his whole day was ruined.
yeah, yeah.
And I said, what's the problem? And he said, you don't need to be acting like this. He says, I can't figure it out. I can't figure it out. I said, well, let me help you. He said, I can't do that because you don't have the clearance. I said, what kind of clearance? He says, well, it's top secret. I said, so what? Give me a for example or
Mhm,
something. So he told me, he says, what if you wanted to make a steering mechanism really portable?
mhm,
It could lay flat.
mhm,
I said, okay. He said, I'll just say that. I said, all right. Well, I thought about it for a minute and I said, have you ever seen a soapbox derby car? He said, yeah. I said, do you know how the steering mechanism works on that? So essentially there's an eye bolt on one end of
mhm,
the axle that
mhm,
goes up through the nose of the vehicle, and it goes around a pulley and goes to the other end of the axle on the other end.
mhm,
And in the middle, that pulley is got a rod sticking through it and a steering wheel. So when you turn that pulley turns and the wheel goes this way or goes this
mhm, mm.
way.
Yep.
He looked at me, he says, oh my God. I said, yeah, it's that simple. And you can make it as flat as you want.
Mhm.
Okay, well, hey, thank you. And I didn't think anything more of it. And I just walked away. A couple weeks later or a few weeks later, I received a little piece of paper certificate from NASA that
Hmm.
said, thank you for helping to invent the steering mechanism for the lunar rover.
Hmm.
And I went, wow, didn't even realize I did that. Okay.
Wow. But he was kind enough to give credit to you
Yeah, I was kind enough to do that. That was
because, but did you get paid a lot of money? Get paid a couple of $1 million
well,
or?
I'm sure that Hughes themselves got paid a lot of money for that. I know we got to sell him the steering mechanism. We sold him the cables and all the things he needed for it. But yeah, it wasn't any big deal, but it turned out to be something really spectacular. Years later, my vice president of engineering at a company that I owned, he calls me and he said, did you ever meet or hear the guy that created the uh, axle portion of that had to be on an ellipse
Mhm.
so that you could go over rocks and you do that? I said, no, I never did. He says, well, I know the guy personally, and I told him what you did, and he says he wants to meet you. I said, well, that's fine. At the time, I was in Sydney, Australia. I said, where's he at? He says, he's in Japan. He's willing to jump on his plane and come down and meet you tomorrow morning. I said, he's going to jump on his plane. So he's got his own personal jet. He says, yeah, he's a billionaire and he owns this big company. He wants to come down and meet you. I said, great. So we sat there and talked for about 4 hours. It was a great experience. He invited me
Wow.
to Japan and we did some business with his companies and it was kind of fun. But anyway,
Hmm.
yeah.
That's what they say. What goes around comes around. Something that you invented or created some years
Yeah.
back, you did not get a lot of credit for it, but the word gets out. Somebody hears about it a few years later, and somebody jumps on a plane to come see you, give you credit, or maybe bought you coffee, bought you uh, whatever. But that connection too, and then yes, you said you did business with him, and you've been around the world a lot. You've been to, I'm sure, many countries. Which are some of the countries you've worked in, and where would you encourage today's young and upcoming entrepreneurs? Where would you advise them to go based on those years of experience internationally?
Well, one of the best continents I've ever been on is the African continent because there's so much that hasn't been explored there still.
Mhm.
And there's such a level of distrust for those who already live there. So
Mhm.
if you're an outsider and you can convince them that you're a
Mhm.
decent person, then there's an
Absolutely.
opportunity there. So
Absolutely.
there's that. Spent a lot of time in the Middle East.
Mhm.
Spent a lot of time in the UK. Time in South America and America, of course.
Mhm.
Spent some time in the Asian countries and Singapore and
Mhm.
Taiwan and places like that.
Mhm.
And and the country that I love the most, quite honestly, and I apologize to all the other countries, is I love India.
India.
India, yeah,
Fantastic.
India, and the people in India are just they're so humble.
Mhm.
They're so willing to help you regardless of what you need.
Mhm.
That's what they do.
Yep.
And their attitude towards life is such that it's not ever, well, I have this or I have that. I mean,
Mhm.
I've met a score of billionaires in India, and the ones that I met never had that attitude. Their
Mhm.
attitude was they were so grateful that I was there to be able to
Mhm.
talk to them and so on and so forth. And we had wonderful, meaningful discussions about things that would benefit India. And
Mhm.
uh, that was huge as
Mhm.
compared with having been to some Middle Eastern countries where when you sit down, it's pretty clear to them that I don't have the money that the king has, or some
Because the king is super wealthy from black gold.
so they look at you like, oh, you're just another person, and that's okay too. I mean, uh, but I've had the good pleasure of, in my capacity, to meet kings and queens and princes and princesses and people who are directors and uh, secretaries of this or that or the other thing, and prime ministers and presidents, and I've met all those kinds of people, all varying levels of wealth, uh,
Mhm.
and that was fine. And I always looked at it the fact that here I was a kid that started out as a homeless kid, and I was able to meet all these people, and I sat there thinking, if they only knew that I was a homeless kid at one, I wonder if they'd even talk to
Well,
me.
you didn't go to meet them because you were homeless. You went to meet them because you brought something of value. You brought something special to them.
Yeah, that's exactly right,
Yeah.
and so it was great. I remember when I met with Margaret Thatcher in London. We were supposed to meet for 15 minutes to discuss the offshore oil platforms here in the North Sea, and we wound up meeting for 45 minutes. We spent about 15 minutes on the North Shore. Then we started talking about some of the other countries that I'd worked with and been with, and personalities that I'd met, and we just hit it off, and we had a great time. And finally, your security came in and said, "You out," and they
Were
said,
that
"You're too far behind.
were
Get
really
him out."
were they really that rude? I know British can be straightforward, but
What's that?
I
Oh yeah,
say
they were
with
very straightforward. Well, it was their
wow.
security team.
Okay.
That was very straightforward. I negotiated the oil rights for the country of Tunisia in a basement off of Hyde Park in a
Mm.
hotel there, and it was everybody in the room had a machine gun and stood in the corner of the room had a machine gun, and
Mm.
that's how we were negotiating. And
And
uh,
you were the only guy without nothing, or you had your atomic bomb
well,
waiting over a
no, I
hovering
didn't
somewhere in
have
the
any
air.
weapons, and the people that I was negotiating with didn't have any. But these people that were standing in the corners, at first they made me nervous, and I just blocked them out of my mind and said, they're not here to hurt me. They're here to hurt anybody that might come into the meeting
Yeah, yeah,
uninvited.
yeah, yeah.
And so, as a former general of Iran, it was the oil minister for Tunisia. It was a lot of people that were in there that had a vested interest, but they didn't want to deal with the
Mm.
major oil companies. And this general, former general in Iran, suggested that I was trustworthy, and a guy in Kuwait backed it up, and so that's why they decided to use me. And I did it. I didn't make much money. In fact, I didn't make anything. They paid for all my expenses, but I just wanted the fun experience of it. It was kind of cool.
And you got to experience guys standing at the corner with machine guns or bazookas, whatever that was then.
Yeah, no, it's very seldom that you get sent in a room with a bunch of people with weapons.
That's a story that you can regale to your children and grandchildren. I'm sure they'll love to hear. Grandpa went through some things very unusual. And the title of your book is Unlikely. Why did you title your book Unlikely?
Because it's unlikely that someone who was started out homeless would ever become successful at anything, doing anything, because nobody gives a person like that any opportunity
Yes,
at
sir.
all. They have to make it on their own. Nobody says, "Well, you're a homeless kid, so here, let me help you out. Let me show
Absolutely
you
true.
this, or show
Doesn't
you."
work like that.
Nobody showed up and said, "Let me show you this or show you that."
Thank you.
Nobody did that. There was one guy, Mr. Nicolosi, who showed up, and when I told him at age 9.5, I couldn't find a job, and at age 9.5, I was 5'7". So he looked at me as this little short Italian guy, and he said, "Well, get a job." And I said, "Sir, I've tried. I've walked up and down El Cajon Boulevard in San Diego, and nobody will hire me when they find out I'm 9.5 years old." He looked at me and he said, "You're 9.5." I said, "Yes, sir." "Can you wash dishes?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "You're hired." And that was how our family began to move out of homeless into the realm of poor, and then kind of moved up the ladder from there. Yeah,
Until you are standing shoulder to shoulder with kings and queens and the Iron Lady herself, Margaret Thatcher.
yeah, yeah. So
That
it
is
was
definitely unlikely.
it was unlikely, and that's why I call that book that, because I think people say to themselves
That
all.
is what a Vuvuzela blast of. Appreciate that. That's
I think
amazing.
people say to themselves all the time, "Oh, it's unlikely I'll ever get a chance to do that. It's
Wow.
unlikely that I could whatever." And
Wow.
it's not true. You can. It
Where
just
can we get,
no.
where can our listeners, our followers, our viewers, our fans, fanatics, and yes, those who are still filled with hope, where can they get copies of Unlikely? Because I'm going to get my hands on that. I'm not going to let it go until I finish reading it.
Well, you can read it on Kindle for free off of Amazon, or you
Yeah.
can go out to drrawson.com and you can go to my library, and all my books are out there and they're all free. All you have to do is download them. You can read them right from the site. There's some software we employed so that you can read it and it turns the pages for you. It's kind of cool.
So, no luck for those of us who are still friends of good old. We need to flip a page and smell it and, feel
Oh,
like that connection with.
you can get that from Amazon. Yeah, you can
Fantastic.
get it
Now, I
from
like that because
Amazon.
we want to patronize. We want our viewers to patronize and support your ideas because they read it, they forget a copy on the table. One of their children, their sons, their daughters read it. Then they get to know about you and the contributions that you've made into the world. So it's good to read it electronically, but I'm telling all the story warriors and story warrior associates, I call them swans, to go get these books, read them, share them, because that's how knowledge grows. That's how we
Sure.
transmit knowledge. We
Yeah.
don't read and keep to ourselves. We read and talk about it and share in the form of a story. That's how we inspire the next generation. Not even before the next generation, inspire each other to do good work. You've
Yeah.
done amazing things, Mr. Rawson. I could go on and on and on and on, but I do not want to abuse your time. I want us to do a quick rapid fire exercise in which I will ask a very short question and you can give me a very short answer. And let's see, someone who has a shorter attention span might benefit from this. So, so first question is, Dr. Rawson, what is the best book you've read?
The best book I've ever read was Think and Grow Rich.
Oh, by
Besides
Napoleon Hill.
besides the Bible. Okay.
Okay, right.
The Think and Grow Rich was a book that helped me understand the power of goals and setting goals for myself, and Napoleon Hill did an amazing job with that. I mean, it's sold as many copies, I think, as the Bible has. It's just an amazing book.
And it still continues to change lives until today. That
Yeah.
every successful person I speak to, they will mention that in their top 2 or top 3, regardless, or in Africa, in Asia, and here. So thank you for reaffirming that. Who are your top 3 heroes when you were growing up?
When I was growing up, the first time I was introduced to the library, I was in 8th grade. And the librarian said, "What do you like to read about?" I said, "I like to read the stories about other people." She says, "Well, that's called a biography or an autobiography."
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh, okay." And so she sent me over to this little section, and that was a section where there were the Horatio Alger stories.
Yep.
And there were all the biographies and autobiographies of great men like Madison and Washington and all those kinds of early people that settled this country. And so there must have been about 100 and some odd books, and I read every one of them over a summer.
No kidding.
And I just absolutely consumed it. And it turned out that George Washington is really one of my favorite people for a couple of reasons. Number one, he's father of our country, which means he had to have a huge vision in order to kind of pull this thing together. And being the very first president, he could have been the first king.
Yeah, could have been a king. That's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the other thing about him is he's a brother Mason. I'm a Mason, a Freemason, and he's a brother Mason. And he was also he was master of his lodge when he was president of the United States, which is no easy feat, I'll tell you. So I have a great amount of respect for him. He's probably one of my biggest heroes.
Okay. And I know you've done work in Africa. And some of the people that we have come to this channel, African diaspora, they're all over the place. They are doing all kinds of works. Which is a favorite country you've been to in Africa, and why?
Wow, that's a great question. In terms of the continent, I found the most interesting to be Egypt. I found the least interesting to be Nigeria. And I found probably the next most interesting to be the northern part of South Africa, which was, it had its own unique problems. And I remember the first time I went there, we went out in a
Northwest province of
Royce. It was a Rolls Royce that was fitted with machine guns on the fenders. That was kind of interesting. I thought, what are the machine guns for? And the guy that owned the car said, "Whatever I need them for."
Wow.
Okay. Well, that was a big lesson for me, but I thought that was pretty interesting. But the time that I spent in Africa, more of it was spent in right in the middle of Africa, and what people call the heart of Africa.
Yeah.
And it's an area where to this day people still don't go.
Yeah.
They'll go all around Africa. They'll go South Africa. They go to Nigeria, Cameroon, and all those kinds of places. They'll go there. But when it comes to going into the heart of Africa,
people still don't
hard
go.
pass. I'll take a hard pass on that.
That's true.
And I think it's because they're too far from what they would consider, and boy, these are my words, and I've never said them before, but a white lifeline. So they're not going to get back to anything that looks like them or that talks like them or anything else in the heart of Africa. And that's absolutely true. But in the heart of Africa, there are some NGOs that go in there, do some great nonprofit work. But we felt that the greatest need there was in healthcare. And the last company that I owned that was of any size was in 55 countries. And our mission was to try and do something that would be helpful to homeless people around the world, not cure homelessness, because you're never going to do that, but to provide some things for them that would make it better for the people and for those people who are witnessing homelessness,
Mhm.
and then to do things in healthcare that would
Mhm.
be beneficial. So
Mhm.
we did some very special things in the heart of Africa there that brought some relief to those in that area.
And that's in healthcare you mentioned. I know you've been very big on your healthcare projects. What were you doing specifically in the heart of Africa with respect to healthcare? Just shed some light briefly.
We created a series of I think it was 20 buildings that had two rooms. One room was a small office. The other room was an exam room. It came equipped with a big screen TV in it and satellite access on top of the roof. And somebody could take a person in there. They would connect with a hospital in Bangalore, India,
Mm.
and a physician would come into their room and they would view the patient and
Mhm.
examine them for whatever they needed, and then they would prescribe local medications, so plant
Wow. Wow.
kind of thing, and
That's amazing.
help the people. So I negotiated with the Prime Minister of India to get free access for internet for India
Mm.
for this project, and we did that. And I negotiated with Dr. Stephen Shetty in Bangalore, India.
Mhm.
He runs a hospital that sees 1,000 new patients a day.
Mhm.
That's huge. And
Mhm.
so it's a teaching hospital, so their interns would go into these rooms and view the people that came in for an examination.
Wow.
So I have no idea whether those are still going or not. I suspect they're probably not, because the heart of Africa rather, tends to swallow up new technology. And if it wasn't good for 50 years ago or 100 years ago, it's probably not good for today. And so those things just tend to get torn down and put aside. But that's okay. That's the way of the world. But it also generated the attitude that nobody really cares about Africa. That's just not true. People
Mhm.
do, but it's just so hard to implement something
Implement.
new in Africa
Implement. Thank you.
unless you're talking around the outside of
The
Africa.
skirt, the outskirts, as you talked. And
Yeah,
what was the name of the project, and which country did you focus on, if you still remember?
we focused on several of them. Wasn't any one in particular, but the name of the project was just the Healthcare Project for Africa.
Mm. Did you do that in collaboration with one of your? No, you mentioned one of your partners from the heart of the continent, from Nigeria. Was he part of that, or there's some
No,
local
he was
people?
not. I didn't even know him at the time.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, this has been a very rich session. And what do you do in your spare time other than write books and tell amazing stories of these incredible feats that you've been able to? Very unlikely stories, but they're true stories because you lived them, you conquered them, you did all this amazing work. What do you do in the spare time?
My favorite spare time thing to do is just to sit and talk with people and see if I can help them, if there's some knowledge that I have that would be of benefit to them. That's why I enjoy interviews like this, because hopefully somebody watching somewhere might get something, get an idea of hope or inspiration that would change their life. And that, for me, that's huge. I write for that same reason.
Mm,
People want gazillion peoples to applaud their writing and to comment.
mhm.
My thinking is always, if one person gets something from what I've written, then then I've done my job. And so
Amazing.
my spare time is filled with literally thinking. I think about how I can be of benefit to others and how I might be able to share something or do something that would benefit others.
You have absolutely given us so much to chew on. You've absolutely helped us with your knowledge, with your inspiration, with your wisdom. And yes, you still you share this with a good sense of humor that transcends all of the people that I know that would come to this channel. What about the human spirit touches you, encourages you? That's the last question. What about the human spirit touches you, encourages you, or inspires you? Because you keep going, even though you're retired, you're still working.
Well, I think the thing that inspires me most is that so many people I meet are willing to change. They're
Mhm.
willing to find the next thing. They're willing
Mhm.
to move forward in spite of all the odds against them and
Mhm.
against what they're trying to accomplish. And I think that that's why our nation has become so great. I think that's why civilization has moved as far as it has, is because against all odds,
Mhm.
people are willing to stick their neck out
Mhm.
and make things better.
Yes.
So
Fantastic.
I applaud that. Anybody that wants to try and make things better. I like the Warrior Project that you have going on, just because hopefully this information gets into the hands of one or two people from each show that could
Yep.
absolutely use it. It's the lifeline that they were looking for, that
Yes.
would encourage them to just keep going.
I absolutely believe that, Mr. Rawson, because you never know whom your story would touch, encourage, or uplift. And in this very episode, you've given us so many drops of lifelines, or as I prefer, storylines that will become lifelines that people can turn into financial fortunes. You have been an absolute blessing to me, to all my viewers, I believe. And I can't wait for more people to see this episode next week, Saturday, when we live cast it. But the encouragement comes from the fact that somebody said to me, they watched a previous show of me talking to Madam Sahana Singh. And he said he's going to watch it 2 or 3 times to be able to fully digest all what is being shared or open up there for conversation. So, what you've shared with us, I know some people will have to watch it 2 times or 3 times. When I was designing that, I did not have any idea it's going to be that meaningful to someone. And I know this would go down as one of the finest. Thank you so much for your time. I could not be lucky. I could not be a more fortunate young man to have been in your presence. Thank you, sir.
Well, I'm very humbled the fact that you that you even want to talk to me. So